Okay. I think this might be working. Welcome, everyone. This is my usual Saturday live stream we do. Sometimes we're doing Q&As. Sometimes we're doing some teaching. Today, I'm going to be picking up on a topic that we have been going over. If you've been watching the last few months, we've been going over 8 ways to beat procrastination. So happy Saturday, everyone. And so you've been hearing, I've taught you at least 20 different solutions on how to beat procrastination. And today is our 8th teaching on this topic. So I've done 7 trainings already on reasons that we procrastinate. And I've just to give you a refresher. So, whether you're procrastinating because of fear, uncertainty, overwhelm, unpleasant tasks, discomfort, time constraints, or low self esteem, we covered all those, and you can find those trainings on YouTube. Just type in 8 ways to beat procrastination in my name, and you should see part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and today 8. So, hopefully, you have enough tools in your quiver that whatever you're setting out to accomplish and do, you can do it. And you have these tools to get over whatever reason you're not going for it. What are the reasons you're not going for it? And I have a special announcement. Okay, so you guys know I have now been going live every Saturday, I think, for over 3 years. But here's my special announcement. I'm now, starting next week, we're going to try this out. We're going to see how it goes. I'm now going to start making it really more exclusive. So you won't just get to be on here and you won't just get to see it. What does that mean? Okay. So instead of me going live on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube, where anybody can just hop on and off, I want those of you who really love me, who that sounded funny, didn't it? Those of you who really value what I'm teaching is what I should say. Those who want to develop more personally, those of you who want to make a bigger difference in your calling, in your purpose, to know your worth as I teach, I want to invite you into my exclusive community where I will be, instead of teaching here live where anybody can see it, I will be teaching in my private Facebook group. I know some of you don't use Facebook, but I'm going to be doing it on Zoom. So when I do it on Zoom, that means I will get to see your beautiful faces and you will get to ask questions, not just in my monthly Q&A, but every week. So, and I'm going to make the session shorter so you don't have to be with me a whole hour. So how are you going to get that? You got to go to the website, purposedrivenchristians.com, and click to join the group. Click to join. Now, there's 3 questions you have to answer, and I have to make sure you're fit and qualified. I'm not going to let everybody in the group. So if you go to purposedrivenchristians.com, you click to join, you'll answer 3 questions, and then you're going to be in my exclusive group, which I will be doing on Zoom. So you'll get to see me. I will get to see you, which is new, right? You've only seen me for 3 years. I'm going to get to see you, and you're going to get to ask questions every week. So I'm going to make it shorter, like 30 minutes, 35 minutes. I'm just going to train for maybe 15 or 20 minutes, and I'm going to open it up to you to answer your questions, almost like I can be, your coach. You guys ask me questions all the time, but because there's no way for you to respond, I can't dig deeper. And sometimes I can't always get you proper answers that you need. So I hope that's exciting for you. Yes. So let me put if you're on purpose-drivenchristians.com. So I put that in the chat of YouTube. If someone watching on Instagram right now could put purpose-drivenchristians.com in the chat, you will get to join my exclusive group because I will, as of right now, I'm going to be shifting after 3 years of going live on YouTube and Instagram to a more exclusive, those of you who are my top people. And I'm only 100 people can get on. So it's the first 100 that get on each Saturday that are going to get to be on, because that's the cap for the program I have on Zoom. Um, so I'm just letting you know we're going to try this out next week and see how it goes. All right. So go, when you're off this live stream, go to purposedrivenchristians.com and click to join my group. Answer the 3 questions. If you get in, awesome. So, all right, we're going to get on the topic today. Today's a final training, and we're going to be tackling perfectionism. Oh, yay, my friend Coco is on. I was just thinking this week, I'm like, I should interview Coco for for my channel. We'll have that discussion later. I saw you tried to call me or you texted me as I was trying to get on. Okay, very cool. Yes, for those of you who maybe have seen my Facebook post, go and look at my Facebook post. I have a GoFundMe campaign up for my dear friend Coco, and I encourage you to donate. So I know some of you guys get on here on Saturdays and you leave me a little donation, which is so nice. I would love to tell you instead to go to my Facebook page and put whatever you were going to donate to me to Coco's GoFundMe page, because she's going through a tough time right now. All right, everyone. So today we're talking about perfectionism, and it's been like 3 or 4 weeks since I've been on, since I've since we've delved into the how to get over procrastination. And so I just mentioned all the topics that we discussed, and the last one was perfectionism. And I've been like trying to come up with material for this for weeks because I don't know, was I trying to be a perfectionist? To try to get it right, to give you the best information. It was even texting Nana this week, our one of our moderators. Yes, Mona is saying perfectionism is crippling. I was texting her. I'm like, I don't know if I have enough. I want to give them more solutions. I don't know if I've got enough of it to teach. And, obviously we could talk about how to get out of procrastination. We could talk about that for years. I think everybody struggles with procrastination to some degree, whether it's one of the 7 topics we've already discussed or the 8th one today. We all struggle with it. So, getting things done is the name of the game. So, let's talk about that. All right. So, the good news is, as I mentioned, I've already given you over 20 solutions in the other 7 trainings, and those the solutions I've given you can work even if you think the reason you're procrastinating may be different than the 8 reasons I brought up. It could still work for you. We have to get free of that chokehold of procrastination and get into action. So no matter what the reason is you're procrastinating, go through those videos and see which of these solutions is going to help work for you. So the 8th one we're talking about today is perfectionism. It gets in the way because you think it has to be perfect. And you have this overly demanding standard that keeps you from even getting started. Like starting is 50% of the battle. If you could just get started, things start moving, things start rolling, but you have this thing going on in your mind where you're like, well, I got to wait for everything to be just right before I begin. No, you have to begin. Now, I know on the surface, perfectionism seems like it's a good thing, but it brings about shame and anxiety and it paralyzes our choices. But a lot of people don't know it can actually even lead to depression. It can poison our relationships. And really, perfectionism is a self prison. It's a prison that you put yourself in. So now is the time where we have to silence that inner critic that's telling us we have to be perfect. And there's many reasons people struggle with perfectionism. Sometimes some of them are related to past trauma. If your perfectionism is due to past trauma, that may be harder to unwind. You know, if you grew up in a household where you were punished if you didn't do everything right, or you had a teacher or a boss that would humiliate you in front of the classroom or in front of your peers if you got something wrong, you know, part of why it may be hard to break out of is due to that past punishment or humiliation you received for not doing it right. So here's another one. You may struggle with OCD, like whether it's been clinically diagnosed or you've noticed or other people have pointed it out to you. OCD at times can be an all consuming, crippling chokehold that doesn't release its grip until you get it right. Now, I have seen this in my son Timothy. He struggles a lot with OCD, and his thoughts are often tormented if he doesn't do things just right. Like he can't just log off the computer. It has to go in a certain way, and he's got to go through this whole series of steps and rules he has in his mind. He has to do certain things, look at the logos, blink certain ways. It's it's a process, and he's made up his mind if he doesn't log out in this certain way, he can't be at peace. Like if you just are fed up that he's been on the computer too long and you've been telling him to get off for like a half an hour, if you just turn the computer off, that could lead to a full-blown tantrum that could take more than an hour or two to get him re-regulated and back to sorts. Um, yeah, he's got to have the perfect blink. He's got to have the perfect move. Sometimes he's got to play with his hands a certain way. It's a whole thing. So, you know, and that some of that could be linked to the autism. You know, some of these diagnoses can intertwine with each other. So, maybe you've heard of people who, like the OCD, they have to close the door like 3 times a certain way or they can't leave the house. Or maybe you've seen that movie where Leonardo DiCaprio portrays Howard Hughes in the movie The Aviator, and you saw how compulsively he had to wash his hands over and over until they bled, only with his own special soap that he carried in a special case in his pocket. And then there's this scene where he's cleaning his hands so viciously until his hands start bleeding, and he uses all the towels up. Then he notices there's a tiny imperceptible stain on his shirt. You can't even see it, and it's going to be covered up when he puts his jacket back on anyway. And he's scrubbing it and scrubbing it and scrubbing it and practically putting his whole upper body in the sink just to get rid of this little stain that nobody's ever going to see. And after he uses up all the towels, goes through this whole ritual, he goes to leave the bathroom and he looks at the doorknob. Ooh, the doorknob's dirty. It's full of germs. He doesn't know what to do. He can't leave. He looks and sees that he's used up all the clean towels. There's no more towels. So he's stuck in the bathroom and he can't get out of it. And he waits and he waits and he waits for this long period of time until someone comes in the bathroom, and he has his hands in his pocket and he runs out without touching the door. Okay, so that's how paralyzing it can be for some people. I have to tell you, we're not going to be dealing with that type and level of OCD. I am not trained in the capacity so to go that deep. We're going to talk about today what we can do for the less rigid types of perfectionism, like the kind that I have dealt with in the past. Now, the type of perfectionism that we're talking about that leads to procrastination. And we're going to be talking about the kind that's more of a personality trait than it is the kind of perfectionism we just talked about that may be linked to other mental health disorders. We're not going to get into that because I am not qualified. All right. So, for those of us who just deal with like a personality trait, like, oh, I got to get it right, and it's nothing beyond that, a psychological thing, we're going to get into that. Okay. So Did you know that between 25 to 30% of teens suffer from maladaptive perfectionism, striving for an unrealistic perfection to the point that it's causing them pain? And perfectionism is more prevalent in females. Did you know that? Yes, researchers have determined there's a genetic component to perfectionism, reinforced by behavior either learned from, um, well, one of the ways it's learned from our perfectionist parents. So we see them having to do everything just perfect when we're growing up. So we assume, oh, we have to do everything just perfect. And but a greater influence can come from environmental factors. So perfectionism in children and teens has increased by 33% in the last 3 decades. All right. But so let's peel back the layers first, because I believe that there's something underneath the label of perfectionism. Now, it's good to have high expectations. Yes, it's good to want to do our best. And scripture tells us in 1 Corinthians 14:40, everything should be done decently and in order. And it also says, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for humans, right? That's Colossians 3:23. So yes, we want to do all things with excellence. And yet, some of you get paralyzed by not being perfect and you don't want to put your work out there. So, let's talk about that. All right. So, let's not think that everything we put out there, all of our creations, has to be perfect. And then we make it take 5 times longer than it needs to put our work out there, even if it only has a couple of minor errors. Um, there was a workshop I attended years ago, and the guy was talking about the 80% rule. And he says, as long as it's 80% as good as I can get it, I put it out. I don't wait to get to 90 or 100%. If it's 80% there, I put it out because it's going to help people. Mona says, it makes me feel anxious when my hair is out of place, especially with my relationships with loved ones. Yeah, that's when you know it has a little bit of a grip. So does it bother you that my hair's messy? I've got lots of hairs out of place today. Or does it only bother you when it's on yourself? That'll be interesting to know. Um, I had a friend who had OCD, and we would go over to his house, and he would have everything set just so. And if he went up to go to the bathroom, we would just mess with him and we would move certain things around on his table and stuff. And he would come back from the bathroom and we'd just be like acting like nothing happened. And he would automatically just put everything back in his place. We did that a few times to mess with him. I know. Isn't that mean? Isn't that cruel? Because we just didn't understand. Like, why does everything have to be so perfect? And not everybody does this in every area of their life. Listen, you could be a perfectionist just in one area. Like I was in my writing, wanting to get everything just perfect. But if you would go into my bedroom and look at the clothes on the floor, you'd think a tornado went through there. So it could just be in a certain area that you're striving for perfection. So let's peel back the layers on perfectionism and look and see what's underneath. Because I believe in many cases that behind the layer of perfectionism and why that makes us procrastinate and not put our work out is fear. All right. So Coco says, is that related to self worth? If you go back, is it part 6 or part 7 of 8 Ways to Beat Procrastination? I specifically talked about self worth and the difference between self esteem and self worth and why that stops us from putting things out there. But yes, that is a big one. That is a big one. So I know you have my book, You Are Worthy. That'll help you with the self worth part. And then in part 6 or 7, here on YouTube, I talked about self esteem and how that stops us from putting our work out there. So, Mona says it's only for me. Okay. All right. So, fear. This often comes to down to we don't want to we think it has to be perfect because we fear what other people will think of us. You're afraid to make a mistake. You're afraid that you won't get it right, not so much for the sake of not getting it perfect, but that people will judge you, or they'll think that you're dumb, or they'll fire you or not hire you, or some other long list of reasons that fear makes you think that you have to be perfect. Now, there was a time when I weighed myself down with the burden of being a perfectionist. I really wanted everything to be perfect, especially in my writing, have no mistakes, until I realized that's because of a label I had growing up as a young adult, that I was ignorant. I even labeled myself as stupid when I got turned down by the local college I applied to. I felt like I was stupid because two of my friends who were in special ed growing up and in high school got into the school and I didn't. So I thought, wow, I really am dumb. I can't even get in, and it just really bothered me for the longest time. And you know, looking back, now with my grown up rational mind, I see that me not getting into that college probably had nothing to do with how smart I was, but probably number one, the fact that God had a different path for me. He had a different plan for my life. Number two, I never took the SAT. Back then, that was one of the requirements for getting into college, formerly known as the Scholastic Aptitude Test. So, at its core, it's designed to test academic readiness for college and your aptitude. So, sometimes we label ourselves incorrectly due to someone else's assessment of us or other circumstances, and we make it mean certain things it doesn't mean. So, if you get fired, if you get kicked off the baseball team, if if you get barred from being a lawyer, whatever it is, we sometimes will make that mean something about ourself when it doesn't always mean something about us. It's just a circumstance, it's just a fact, it's just something that happened. It doesn't mean that we are not a valuable person, that we're not smart, that we don't have something to offer. And we have to look at, God, what is your bigger plan for me in this? You know everything. You know the end from the beginning. You know our future before we were even in our mother's womb. You knew us. So we know that scripture says the plans you have for us are for good and not for evil, to give us a future and a hope. So anything that happens to us, no matter how bad it looks, is part of the grand design. It's like I talked about before, the tapestry. If you've ever looked at a beautiful tapestry, when you turn it around and look at the back, the strings are all over the place and it's ugly and blots of color. It's beautiful in the finished product. But the backside, when it's all being put together and sewn, it's a mess. So we may only see the backside right now. We may only see the mess, but that's not it. That's not the final version. Sometimes we can't see through the darkness, we can't see the light at the end of the tunnel because it's so dark in the middle. So a couple years ago, I was working on a project with my late great mentor, coach, and friend, Tim Omen. And I was spending so much time looking up all of the vendors and all of the people and all of the prices and looking at Yelp reviews. And he was getting a bit frustrated with me that I didn't just pick someone and go for it. And I just wanted to do all of the right things. I was kind of petrified because I was one of the executors for our dear friend's will. And we were trying to find, she had passed away. And I wanted to make sure I found the exact right person who could get the most out of her estate sale for her to give to charity. She wanted to leave her money to these wonderful causes. And my mentor and coach, who also at that time was in the hospital dying, from his hospital bed, he was getting upset with me for procrastinating on moving forward because I was trying to be this perfectionist about it. And the last text he ever sent me before he passed away had this admonishment in it. He said, over analysis is not due diligence, it's simply operating out of fear. So I want to ask you today, can you be honest with yourself and tell me, is your overanalysis, is that really you doing your due diligence, the over and over and over analysis, or is that you operating out of fear? Angela, thank you so much for the super sticker. I really appreciate you. Thank you for your generosity. So, how often do you have to look at every single option before you make a decision? Do you find yourself having to look at every possible what if scenario before you move into action? How often are you stalled because you're worried about not being perfect? You're not getting the car that you need and are relying on everyone else to take you places because you think a newer and better model is going to be coming out soon. Or you're not making that commitment to your boyfriend or your girlfriend because you keep thinking there might be better options coming along. Here's a silly example. I'm guilty of this a lot. I'm guilty of this a lot. Having to look at every single option on the menu before I order. I know there's other girls here that do that. Admit it. Admit it in the comments. I have to consider all the pros and cons on the menu and its nutritional value. Meanwhile, my husband and my kids, they just order what they're craving. They just order what's going to taste best. And I'm like, what are all the nutritional facts? How much grams of this? How much grams? Does it have the nutrients? Is this dead? Is it living food? Is it? Oh, and then half the time I order like a salad that's disgusting and it tastes like the garden still has dirt on it. And I end up like stealing my kids' fries and asking my husband if I can have a bite of his vegan chicken burger because I ordered a dirt salad. Okay. That was not in my notes. That was a side riff. Okay. So, looking at some of your comments. Oh, Brian, welcome back. Good to have you here. Donald is saying it's like the apology of the duck on the water. Calm on top, crazy motion under the water. Okay. Coco says, and then I always end up ordering the same thing, right? We look at every single thing on the menu and then we just get the same thing. So true. All right, you and I must stop trying to be perfect. And when we do, we get stuck in this analysis paralysis. So when you see that happening, as soon as you see that happening, recognize it and move out of it as soon as you see it. And sometimes this happens because we are trying to do things in a vacuum. We're by ourselves, we're toiling in our mind for hours. And we sometimes we just need an outside opinion, someone that we trust. We need our bestie or a counselor or our coach to like help us look at all the options and make a decision quickly. Um, that's so important that you have people around you that you can ask, "Hey, I'm especially in areas where you feel paralyzed. Maybe you have a prayer partner. There's a couple people on here watching right now that help me make decisions sometimes. And you know what? It's biblical, right? Scripture says, in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. In the multitude of counselors, there is perfection. So, not that you need to go around getting 100 people's opinions. Please don't do that. And don't get opinions from scaredy cats. Don't get opinions from people who've never done anything, who've never accomplished anything, who are afraid everything's not going to work. Get a second opinions from people who are going somewhere, who've been somewhere, people who are already successful, whether it's your guidance counselor, your mentors, your pastor. I don't know who it is for you. If you don't have a life coach, get one. Everybody needs one who's trying to accomplish big things in their life. Okay. So as soon as you recognize it, move out of it. Just remember the only person who has ever been perfect who walked the face of the earth was Jesus. Only God is perfect. So I'm guessing there's never even been a book in the entire world written that doesn't have a typo. And there will always be flaws. And sometimes our flaws give us character. If someone nitpicks and finds minor faults with the project you put out and they report it back to you, okay, it happens. Or a piece of art you do, that happens. It's part of life. But those who sit back and who criticize, those are not people we need to fear. Seriously, a lot of times they aren't doing anything with their life. These critics aren't participating in life. They are watching you run the race from the bleachers. And even if you find someone who's outworking or outshining you, if they've got the time to put in the effort to poke holes in your work, then I have to tell you, they're people who are not happy with themselves. With that same critical and judgmental spirit, they nitpick at themselves as well, finding flaws in everything they do. So sometimes you just have to be like, wow, I feel sorry for them. Those people that are trying to tear me down, put me down, boy, they must be extremely miserable that this is all that they can find to do with their life is nitpick on stuff I'm doing. That's a pretty pathetic existence. They don't like themselves. They may actually hate themselves for not being good enough. They torment themselves, forcing themselves to be the best because of some deficit they feel they have in themselves. And they get some modicum of relief by pointing out your flaws and mistakes and how you're messing up more than they are. Like, seriously, what a pitiful existence they must live. Instead of fearing them, I would feel sorry for them. And even more so, pray for them, right? Pray that they get relief from their critical and judgmental spirit. Matthew 5:44 tells us, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. Ephesians 4:32 says, be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another as Christ forgave you. You can't even be bitter to those who've been putting you down or insulting your work. I know, we want to. I have. I've been guilty of this. Romans 12 tells us to bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. I have sometimes not cursed with swear words, but said, can you believe what so and so said about me, what so and so did? And I'm pointing out to people how much I was wronged by this person. This happened even this year. So I'm not guilty. I am not coming to you with solutions from someone who's already got it all figured out and all together. I may be one or two steps ahead of you in figuring some of this out. So I hope this is bringing you some value. Okay. Luke chapter 6 says, love your enemies. Do good to the, oh, I'm choking even trying to say this next part. Oh, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you and pray for those who mistreat you. Listen, rather than fearing what the critics think of you, it's so much better to have the if you're going to fear anything, fear or have a healthy reverence and awe of standing before God one day at the end of your life and having him ask you, why didn't you do the things that I told you to do? Why didn't you use your gifts and talents in a bigger way? All the things he's called you to do, even if you're scared to do it, even if you're worried what others will think, I can't imagine standing before God one day at the end of my life and having the pathetic excuse of, well, I didn't do it, God, because I was afraid it wasn't going to be perfect. Oh, you don't want that. Okay. There's never been a person in history who has done everything perfectly. Now, you do get a lot closer to being perfect or putting in what would some would consider a perfect work the more you practice and the more you train. So, back in the old days in 1976, there was a gymnast who was the first person ever in gymnastics to score a perfect 10. It had never happened before. In fact, they didn't even have a scoreboard that had four numbers on it to read 10.00. It never happened before. So there was only three places on the scoreboard. So people would get scores like 7.56 or 9.50 or 8.68. No one in history had ever gotten a perfect score. And when the first person in history got a perfect 10, the scoreboard showed 1.00, which looked like she only got a 1. Listen, this gymnast trained for almost 10 years every single day before she got this perfect score. And some of you, just like me, are procrastinating because you want your first, second, or third thing you've ever done to be perfect. Come on. You have not put in the time or the training. You have no idea how your imperfect work you put out there is going to help someone. The people whose lives you need to touch with your product or your service or your sound of encouragement will be touched by what you do, even if you can see how it could have been done better. Right? Sometimes I watch my acting performances and I think back, oh, I could have acted differently in that scene and I could have pushed the envelope a little more. Or I think, oh, I did too much there. That's looking pretty dialed in and phony. And sometimes, even for those performances, people still compliment me. Nearly every single day, I'm getting compliments for my acting. And people come up to me on a regular basis, inspired by what I do. Some are even in tears when they meet me. That's shocking to me. And are all of my performances always 100%? I don't know if I've ever, maybe once in 300 projects I've been in, given a perfect performance, right? And so much of this is interpretive because every actor would do it a different way. So maybe I've had a few in the 90th percentile. Maybe I've had a few performances in the 70th or 80th percentile early on. But let's not mention the first 50 auditions I did that would make anyone cringe watching them back. So the key is, are you making a difference for people? Are you doing it with all your heart? Are you doing it as unto the Lord? That's what really matters. Okay, Brian says we are all not perfect, but the only way to become perfected is when we reach heaven and we strive to obey God and listen to Him daily in what we do. That's true. And scripture talks about how God will keep perfecting us and keep perfecting us all the way till we get there. And then when we get there, we will be. God will make us perfect. So let me give you another example. So when I first had a group of people going through my online course, You Are Worthy, part of the reason I did it with live weekly sessions was to get feedback on what I could do to improve it. My coach and my mentor and my consulting producer, they all had different changes they wanted me to make. And to make it better, to take all of their suggestions of how I could make my course better, it would have taken me months and months of re-editing the course. But you know what? I showed it to the group that I had selected that I thought it would help the most. And every week I asked them. Mona was in that group. Nana was in that group. I don't know if Brittany's on. Brittany was in that group. Angela was in that group. I showed it to them, and every week I asked them, what would you change? What could I do better? And never once in that 12 weeks did any of them give me any feedback on what I could have done to make it better. Listen, They were my ideal audience. And yes, there may be consultants out there in your field that maybe could show you how to do things better or be more precise and make it more aesthetically pleasing, more on brand. A lot of experts can give you suggestions to make things better, but the real test is, does it help the people you've been called to help? Right? That's what's key. I remember early on when I tried to get a publisher for my first book. Let me see, show you guys my first book. Um, Poetic Prescriptions for Pesky Problems. And I got this rejection letter, and it started stating all the ways my poetry could have been better. And I got very discouraged. And I didn't think it was good enough because this this poetry expert was telling me that I shouldn't use feminine endings, and he had all these other things that he said was wrong with my poetry that made it not acceptable. I also had very intellectual friends. Hey, Jarrell, very intellectual friends with writing degrees, and they were calling my work bromide. That's bromide. I was like, I don't even know what that word means. Thank you for the feedback. So she wrote bromide on my papers, and of course, I had to look up that word, and it means a platitude of trite saying, as in my poetry was a platitude of triteness, which is like meaning it's like nothing. It's not saying anything or whatever. And the meaning of, as a person, a bromide person is one who is platitudinous and boring. So here my scholarly friend with all the degrees was saying that my poetry and me is a boring and trite. Man. So, but guess what? I still felt God was calling me to put my poetry out there and publish it anyway. And so I finally got the courage to do that because all the feedback I got from regular people like you who were actually being helped, who were actually my readers. And I decided to just go for it. Most of the times, your critics, listen to this very carefully. Most of the times, your critics, the people telling you don't do it, for whatever reason, they're not even your audience. They're not even your customers. You're not putting your stuff out there who could help people, because of people who would never even buy your stuff or listen to you anyway. That's crazy town. We can't do that anymore. We're not doing it for them. We're doing it for the people God has called us to help. We're not going to be everyone's cup of tea. That's okay. They can go get a different flavor. There's people who are going to like our flavor and like it very much, and they're going to pay us for our flavor of tea. Okay. So make sure that you're asking yourself, who are you trying to be perfect for? Because the people God has called you to help often aren't looking for perfectionism. Like you guys who are on here right now, did you honestly come here because you're like, Katherine is so perfect? I highly doubt it. I highly doubt it, right? Even my eyes don't match, right? They're, they're perfect. What is that? Have I ever had my hair perfect? Probably never. Sometimes I'm on here with lipstick stains on my teeth. It's all good. I'm out here to serve. I'm out here to make a difference. So when the people God has called you to help aren't looking for perfection, as a matter of fact, when you have little mistakes or errors, it can put them at ease because they see that you're human, you're real, and you're not perfect. It shows them that they can step out of their comfort zone and do things that will make a difference, and they don't have to worry about being perfect. Those of you who've taken my online course, You Are Worthy, you'll notice that lessons 1 through 11, I look a certain way. And then COVID happened, and then lesson 12, I'm like 30 pounds heavier. I backed down that COVID 30. Um, and then initially I was like, oh my gosh, it doesn't match. I look bigger and puffier and all like. But then I'm like, girl, please. This course is about your worthiness that has nothing to do with your outside looks. So I thought if anybody criticizes me on that, well, shame on them. Us women go through fluctuations. It's out. You'll see now. Now you'll those of you who have the course. If you guys are interested in the course, youareworthycourse.com. I have it on sale right now. Okay. All right. We don't have to worry about being perfect because it helps others see that they don't have to be perfect either. Coco says, I'm here because you accept me as I am and I am inspired and inspire me to be my best self. Thank you. Nana says, your work, you and your work are so far from bromide. Thank you. Okay. Millie, you're asking a question, but because it's off topic, I'm not going to answer it today. But go to purposedrivenchristians.com, join my group. I'm now going to be doing Zooms and interacting with you personally, where you will be able to ask me questions. I am excited about the new format I'm going to be going after. Okay, so my business coach recently mentioned that in every email or piece of social media she puts out, she leaves one or two errors in there on purpose because she wants to come across as a real person. What? Picture that. I always have errors just because I don't know grammar. So I don't need to put any in on purpose personally because I already make mistakes. Spell check is my friend, but it doesn't always tell us where to put the commas. So yes, so she leaves one or two errors in on purpose because she wants to come across as a real person. Also, it gives certain people the opportunity to reach out to her, those perfectionists, and let her know that there's a mistake. So then she can be like, oh, thank you so much. And she can start to build a relationship with those people. So I'm guessing that even those people who point out the mistakes, they feel good about themselves because they're being helpful for pointing it out. So I found that fascinating that people would leave in a typo or two just to be relatable. So it's in the same way. If you're on my YouTube channel, or if those of you who are watching on Instagram, if you go to youtube.com/Katherine Norland, you'll find videos on my channel where I've stains on my shirt, blueberry or spinach stuck in my teeth, my hair not combed, my makeup on. I even did one in my pajamas one day because I was inspired. So you can see I'm just a regular person. And when you can just be yourself and you're not always looking like you stepped off the runway, people can relate to you and they can feel like they can be themselves and not put so much pressure on themselves. Because we're in the society where people curate their social media to only put their very best moments. And even those very best moments they put out are totally photoshopped. We don't know they're a crying hot mess when they get offline and are screaming at their spouse and yelling at their kids and like, you're messing up my picture. That stuff happens all the time. I once saw someone at a bar was filming someone across the thing who was like doing all these Instagram poses with their like boyfriend and acting all lovey-dovey in this perfect setting. And as soon as the picture was done, she started like yelling at him. And this person caught it on camera, showing like not everything is as it appears. Not everybody has it all together like they're pretending to. So you don't have to look like you stepped off a runway. You want people to relate to you, and then they don't have to put so much pressure on themselves. But listen, just one caveat. I'm going to give you a caveat. I talk about this in my You Are Worthy course, youareworthycourse.com. You don't have to look like a total mess and never comb your hair or take a shower just because it's only the heart that matters. I mean, how are you going to draw people to the beauty and splendor and glory of God and what you're promoting if they need a gas mask to sit next to you? That's the caveat. Okay. We should try a little bit. Okay. But we don't have to look perfect and it doesn't have to be an all the time thing. Okay. Remember, we represent the King of Kings. So It's okay to look nice. It's okay to have a pleasing appearance as long as it's not consuming you and taking up all of your time and your money and your thought life to do it. And you're not executing on your goals and your dreams because of some outward desire of perfection. Does that make sense? Yes, you guys are giving me some great comments. Okay. So, number one, what I want you to try is work on diminishing the importance of doing everything perfectly and emphasize the importance of completing tasks in a timely fashion. I'm going to say that again. You need to work on diminishing the importance of doing things perfectly and emphasize the importance of completing tasks in a timely fashion. I remember about 10 years ago, I was convinced that it takes 3 months to write a chapter. Whenever I was working on a book, because that's what my history was, it takes about 3 months to write a chapter. But then I had this coach I was working with weekly, and he challenged me about that assumption. So I've had coaches for at least the last 15 years. Always had a coach to help me get to that next level. So he challenged me um, and said, "Well, what if you could get it done in less time?" And I was thinking, what, like 2 or 2.5 months instead of 3 months? And he said, "No, 3 days." I thought he was crazy and delusional because I would often spend 3 days just working on one poem in these poetry books. And not the whole chapter, like one poem. So, because I always try to listen to my coaches, because they can see beyond what you can see when it comes to your capacity and your capabilities, they push you not only out of your comfort zone, but they help you change your perspective on what you believe is even possible. So, I figured out how many poems were supposed to go in that chapter. And I set a timer on my phone based on how many I'd have to get done in those 3 days, with the hours I could write each day. So, knowing I had to do a certain amount of poems per day, I had to set a timer for the 2.5 hours or whatever it was to work on that poem. And when the timer went off, I had to be done with that poem. So it's easy to want to, for me, I would look up every single word in the thesaurus. What are some different, better word choices that I could say to give it more zip and more zazz and more, you know? So when the timer went off, I had to move on. And so because I was doing that in such a focused manner and going, I don't have 3 months for this chapter, I have 3 days. What it did is it honed me in. It helped me be more focused and less distracted. I didn't have time to go off and do a bunch of other stuff during that writing time. In the past, I might have like, oh, I'm going to go for a little walk. I'm going to go get another snack. Maybe I'm going to put a load of laundry in. I'm going to take some, let's see what people are posting on social. I didn't have time for any of that. I had to hone in and zone in. And at the end of the 3 days, I couldn't believe it. I had a chapter done that broke through whatever mental barriers that thought it wasn't possible. Now, to be honest, the poems could have been better. They could always be better. I publish a book and I'm like, I go back and read it and I'm like, oh, I should have used a different word here. You can't be like that. So it wasn't my best work, but what I did is then I spent okay, I spent like 1 or 2 days after that 3 days just polishing that chapter. So, but the good news is that means that chapter took me 4 to 5 days instead of 3 months per chapter. I started doing chapters in 4 or 5 days of highly focused work. And this was around the same time that I drove to San Diego for this 4 day seminar on how to be a high performer and getting more work done. And that ended up being the first time it was this book. Ended up being the first time, Poetic Prescriptions for Eternal Youth. It ended up being the first time I ever got a book done in months rather than years, because all my other books have taken years. Okay, I'm telling you that as a great example of what you are capable of. So, number two, I want you to keep a list of examples of times when perfectionism has been unhelpful to you. I bet you can think of some right now. Type it in the chat. Type it in the chat. Um, oh, hey, Raymond, welcome to my channel. So, keep a list of examples when perfectionism has been unhelpful to you and times when task completion has been more helpful to you. So, when are the times where you just like, you know what? I just have to get it done. It's not going to be perfect. And that's been helpful to you. And name a time, I bet you can name thousands where you have lost opportunities because you didn't get something done because you wanted it to be perfect and somebody else turned in the work ahead of you. They got it done. They got the raise, they got the promotion, they won the thing, they made the contest, they did whatever. And you looked at their stuff and you're like, but this isn't even as good as mine. Yeah, but it was done. Done beats perfect. So keep a list of examples when perfectionism has been unhelpful to you and when times of task completion has been more helpful to you. So I just mentioned the quote. One of my coaches, Nick Unsworth of Life on Fire, I've taken 3 of their courses. I've taken their course Life on Fire, Bestseller on Fire, and Speaker on Fire. He always says, done beats perfect. My finished project that may need a little work and is out there helping people is actually better than your perfect project that is still sitting on your desk. Thank you for the balloons, or is still sitting on your hard drive of your computer. My not perfect work that's out there is helping more people than your perfect work still sitting on your computer. Okay, it sounded a little snotty there, didn't I? I just want to drive home this point to you. Okay, so Anandit is asking me about publishing. You know what? Ask me in the Zoom meeting next week. You guys, I don't know if any of you guys know this, but I used to lead a writers group for 12 years. I've helped a lot of people, encouraged a lot of people, and helped them get their books published. And I'm in the acknowledgement section of a lot of books because of that. Okay. Oh, Nana, you guys on here? Nana, I lit a fire under Nana's butt for years, and she had been wanting to do a poetry book for years, and she finally did it. I'd like to think I was a little bit of an inspiration to her to do that. She'll say yes. Okay. Marie Forleo says it's not your job to judge your work. If you're not ashamed of the first thing you put out, you waited too long. So, if it's not fear, there could be lots of reasons that you're a perfectionist. We did not cover ones that may be tied to mental health issues or psychological issues. We're just covering personality trait ones. So we covered that you may be a perfectionist out of fear. The other reason you may be a perfectionist and not, let's see, I'm trying to look at my notes. Where did I leave off? Perfectionism takes on many different forms. Let's start there. When you meet a man or a woman that you feel like, oh, they have everything, and people envy them, and they always looked polished and put together, and they're totally fit, and their cars are always dust free, and their homes are immaculate, and their children are well dressed and well behaved. I can't relate. And they're like overachievers at work. I might relate a little on that one. But they love the accolades and they love the praises of mankind. Listen to what the Apostle Paul talks about this, and he talks about putting confidence in the flesh, meaning what you can do on your own without God. All of these things you don't necessarily need God's help for. You're doing it with your own strength, with your own might. That's in the flesh. So in Philippians chapter 3, Paul talks about this kind of perfectionism. He says, if someone thinks they have reason to put confidence in the flesh, I have more. Circumcised on the 8th day, of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of the Hebrews, in regard to the law, a Pharisee, like that's the highest you could be. Is it Pharisee or Sadducees that are the highest you could be in the religious traditions back then. Zeal, persecuting the church. As for the righteousness based on the law, faultless. He's saying, the Jewish people had over 600 laws they had to follow, like 613, if I remember right. Paul is saying, I was perfect. I was flawless in all the laws. Now, this is not being perfect in God's eyes. This is being perfect, a bunch of rules that people decided you needed to do to be godly. Doesn't mean your heart's in it, right? Samuel says, man looks at the outer appearance, God looks at the heart. So he's saying, I was the most perfect and faultless. But he goes on to say, but whatever were gains to me, like those things he gained, I now consider loss for the sake of Christ. What's more, I consider everything a loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Jesus Christ as my Lord, for whose sake I have lost all things. Like all those things he says, I consider them garbage that I may gain Christ and be found in him, not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law, but that which is through faith in Christ, the righteousness that comes from God on the basis of faith. What he's saying here is he was the most perfect in the law of the Pharisees, and he followed all of the rules. He was from the best tribe. He persecuted Christians. He even had some of them killed because he felt like they were not following the one true God of Israel. But what he found out was important was none of those earthly things, those laws that, we thought we had to be so perfect in following. All the things that we are told we need to do that are based on our might, our flesh, our willpower. It was all trash compared to the righteousness that comes from being in Christ. But he could never gain, the righteousness we get from being in Christ could never be gained by our own works. That's why we don't have to be perfect. We think, oh, God would never accept me. I've got so many flaws. I've done so many wrongs. Wrong. Because your perfection, your righteousness isn't found in by what you do with your own strength and might, right? Salvation is a gift through faith by grace from God so that no one can boast. You can't boast in all the things you've done because you can't get saved by all the things you've done. You could follow all 613 laws and still not go to heaven if you don't have faith and a relationship with our heavenly creator. That's sad. That's really sad. You could do, there's a scripture that says, when someone died and they got to heaven and they said, but God, we did all these things for you. We did this in your name. We did this in your name. We did this in your name. And God said, leave. I never knew you. I never knew you. We have to know God. We don't just have to follow the rules. And I hope that takes a lot of pressure off of you. And I know we're going over a little bit, but this is important. And I don't want to draw it out to 9 videos on this same series. So it's important for us to know that God is not accepting us based on how perfect we are, but based on our faith in his son and what he has done for us. Okay, that was a sidebar. That was not even in my notes. Holy Spirit inspired. Just get on it. Okay, so he goes on to say, but one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining towards what is ahead. I press toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. So, no matter how well he's done in his life, or his accolades, or how wonderful people think his accomplishments are, he says he forgets about all of them and he strives forward for the goals God has for him that are heavenly, not earthly. So, what does this mean for you? What does this mean for you? What this means for you and I is whatever we are doing, to look perfect or to be perfect in the eyes of man, to gain status, to have all these things outwardly, the filled up bank account, the six pack abs, to look forever youthful, have a mansion in the best neighborhood, win trophies, medals, awards, and Oscar. Those things, in comparison with the righteousness we can gain by being in Christ, is all garbage. I'm not saying having goals is not good, it is. But it does you no good in light of eternity. It's not going to be a determination of you. You could go up to God and show him your 3 Oscars that you won in your lifetime, and he's going to be like, okay, who are you? Okay. So you have to have that relationship with him first. So you've got to do what you're called to do. What are you put on this earth to do? How are you here to make a difference for others? What can you do to be God's hands and feet to make a difference in a hurting world? Okay, God has given you gifts to help others, and he's put you here for a reason. And we'll be done in 5 minutes. Those of you who are like, she's over her hour, we'll be done in 5 minutes, I promise. God has given you gifts to help others. And it's not to go after for our own glory. So if we put the perfectionism aside, whether it's based on pride or whether it's based on fear, and we stop procrastinating and we put our work out there and we do the things God's called us to do to be a blessing for others, and we stop looking for validation from others about how good we are and if we just stop fearing others and what they'll think of our work, and we put it out in the world, and it's not about it being good enough. It's about us using our gifts to serve others and be a blessing. Put your projects into the world. If you don't, the world may never know what it's missing, but you might, and you might regret it for the rest of your life. When people get to the end, their regrets aren't the things that they did, like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Their regrets are really the things that they didn't do. Okay. All right. So I have one more thing I want to share with you. It's going to be a sneak peek of something from my new book that's coming out in October. But first, I want to remind you, if you want to get on live with me on Zoom and ask me questions and have a more personal training that not everybody can get on, go to purposedrivenchristians.com. Somebody put it in the chat, purposedrivenchristians.com. and answer the 3 questions, and we'll see if you can be in my exclusive group. So I want to end today with a sort of a call to action for you to stop procrastinating and use the creative gifts God has given you, no matter how imperfect they are, and share. I'm going to share this exclusive sneak peek of a poem I've never read out loud before from my new up and coming book out this October. I finally have a title. You guys have been talking to you about this book for like at least 6 months, right? I finally know what the title is. I don't know what the subtitle is yet, but the title of the Hollywood book is called Smoking Hopium. It'll all make sense to you when you read the book. Smoking Hopium. All right. So this poem is called I Am a Creative. You and me, we're the same, built of molecules and atoms, brought upon this world in search of us. Life, intermittent frequencies becoming matter, begin to matter. We crash into one another in search of meaning, like the substance in a can of spray paint that the cosmos has shaken up. Where does it begin and where does it end? I find myself contemplating the same questions. When my essence is sprayed out on the earth, what shape will it take? If I can be anyone, who will I be? If I can say anything, how should I use my voice? If I can do anything, can I not follow my passion? Where do I focus my love? Does love require a focus? Should I be specific, funnel it into one area, or spray it around, leaving dots of my existence on every thought, every idea, and every project, spreading my life's pigment with every breath. Can I make creativity my currency? Am I meant to spend endless days a slave to a world run by greed and lust? I mustn't give in, lest the dollar signs cloud my conscience and muddy my paint, so my sheen is no longer seen, and my gloss coat is spattered with the debris of compromise. We are the intellectual future of the world. We can take a cacophony of chaos and build a bridge of beauty. We design dreams, innovate ideas, propel passions. We ignite imaginations, formulate fantasies. We color creation with our consciousness. We produce the impossible. We invent the unimaginable. We actualize the absurd and leave our signature on it. We tag the walls of our life exquisitely or crudely. We create. We are each our own shade, unlike any other, and we are needed to color this world in a way that no other can. Not a single individual that passes through this earth will ever have the voice that I have, the ideas I possess, the talents I retain. If I don't unleash that part of me, no one will ever be stirred by what I create. No one will ever see the colorfulness of my vision. The world will never hear the melody of my mind or experience the things that only I can do. The world will never know what it missed, but I will. I won't go to my grave with regret. Instead of taking all that I am, collecting it in cans, sitting safely on my cans, I will get off my can, shake it up, and press down the button and let that color spray out. Like a muralist leaves their mark on places they have been, some choosing the design, colors, and patterns with care, transforming what was a blank canvas, unvalued, into something beautiful or breathtaking. Others, in haste, choose what's cheap and convenient, taking away from what was, defacing and devaluing. So desperate to leave their mark, they spray and run, leaving empty cans and empty hearts. Will I spray a sloppy tag just to let you know I was here? Or will I make a masterpiece, a memorial, a contribution that affects the seer, inspiring others to use their gifts? Starting now, I will light my horizon. In every spectrum I have, I will pursue my dream, built of drive and ambition, able to create visual and lyrical imagery to stimulate the senses. I will allow myself to imagine and follow my heart's lead. I will live a life worth living. I am an artist, a lover, a brother, a friend. I am the chartreuse in the world's color palette. I am a creative. Today is the day. The world is your wall. How will you paint it? Thank you for being here today. And I hope to see you on the new platform. Go to purposedrivenchristians.com, answer the 3 questions to join the group, and let's get some face-to-face time. I want to see who you guys are. All right. Take care. God bless.